Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us. Martin Winterkorn, the former CEO of Volkswagen, is on trial in Germany. He could face up to 10 years in prison. 2015, researchers at West Virginia University found that VW had been using illegal software to pass emissions tests, even though the engines themselves continued to emit noxious gases. Now, VW admitted it was using illegal software back in 2015 in September of that year. The U.S. wants to extradite Winterkorn, though that will probably not happen because Germany does not extradite its own citizens. But most importantly for this discussion, why should this concern us at all? What does it mean? Why is it important? And what do we need to understand about this in terms of corporate abuse of power and responsibility? To walk us through all this, we once again turn to Bill Black, Associate Professor of Economics and Law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One, and a regular contributor here at Real News. And Bill, welcome back. Good to have you with us again.
Thank you.
So where do we start with this? I remember when this happened a few years back when this first came out, and he's being prosecuted at this moment. But talk about why this particular case is so important, what it means.
Sure. So let's go back to when it actually happened.
Okay.
Which is not, in 2015, but many years before. So VW's global strategy was they were going to become the biggest car company in the world, and they were going to do it the old-fashioned way by cheating. So they had an impossible task, and it's a classic example of too good to be true. They were going to start with diesel fuel because that had lots of advantages in terms of producing a relatively cheaper engine. And even though diesel fuel inherently tends to be more polluting, they were going to do some miracle, and it was going to end up being an extraordinarily low emissions automobile. Only one problem. It didn't work. And it never worked, right? So what's the obvious answer when your fraud scheme fails? You create a second fraud scheme. And the second fraud scheme was to claim that you met the emissions levels. But of course, people were going to test that. So you needed a third stage fraud scheme. And, we're all in awe of German technology and such. And VW is at the top of the game. But A, VW couldn't, in fact, produce clean diesel any more than you could create clean coal. And B, it didn't have the technology to create the cover-up. Now, the cover-up is just basically an algorithm. And the algorithm says, oh, we got sensors, because a modern vehicle is really a whole bunch of sensors. It's really a whole bunch of computer chips, right? And we sense, we're following 16 things are happening. We're being tested for emissions level. And the algorithm says, okay, let's change how the engine performs. And under the new way the engine performs, emission levels fall enormously. It's just, if you actually ran the engine that way, not on a test bed, but like on a road, you could go 20 miles an hour, right? So it doesn't work as a vehicle, right? It is a pure scam. And it's not a little scam. It's not like VW failed to meet the emissions levels, by a little bit. The actual emission levels of nitrous oxides in particular can be 20 times the emission levels permitted, right? So this is a massive scandal. And because VW lacked the expertise to do the algorithm instrumentation scam internally, they actually outsourced it, right? So they outsourced their cover-up fraud, where another company was happy to create a software, the sole purpose for the software being to cover up a massive fraud.
And it worked.
Right. And it worked. And they sold 12 million vehicles globally, 500,000 in the United States, under this double fraud thing, that their engine actually was low emissions and that there was, they didn't do anything to the testing. It was all completely kosher, when it was, in fact, all completely rigged. Now, first thing, this was spectacularly successful. It allowed VW to become the largest car producer in the world, create enormous profits, and millions of euros went into the
I mean,
pockets.
all from this one act, from creating this piece of software?
Two acts. One, from creating the engine that didn't work, and two, from creating the engine that didn't work but was cheap, all right? And then creating the software to hide the fact that the engine didn't work. So it's actually those two acts that were critical to their quote-unquote success. It was enormously successful. The company made a ton of money. The chief executives made a ton of money. The software company that created the device solely to be a scam paid a ton of money. Everybody was happy, except, of course, for the honest competitors, and, of course, for the fact that this actually kills people. Right. So the nitrous oxides aren't the absolute most lethal things, but the bottom line is they were literally willing to kill people through massive frauds on 12 million vehicle sales in order to become personally wealthy, or when they were already extraordinarily wealthy people. So that tells you about corporations.
So, let's take this to the where we live right now, what's happening now. So Martin Winterkorn, who the former CEO is on trial in Germany. He may go to prison if he's convicted. 7 to 10 years is what I read. But talk about what's going on between our two countries and around this. I mean, corporate leaders, from the bank fallout to everything else, have gotten away with murder all the time. They never go to jail. They never have to answer individually for what they've done. So what's different here, if anything?
Well, it's not clear that anything will end up being different. And, some of them do go to jail. It's just that the graph in the United States for elite frauds looks like this. So convictions are declining under every administration for the last 4 administrations. That included Obama. But, of course, it's off the charts now. And the Trump administration will come back to why would the Trump administration actually be willing to be tough on the Germans. But let's start with your broader question. So Germany is actually the place that gave us Transparency International. This is the global anti-corruption group, but of ex-business people, right? And their story is, there are these poor companies, all honest in the global north, and they want to do business. And unfortunately, the global south is enormously corrupt. And so it creates transparency and anti-corruption scales. And guess who's the best in the nation usually, best in the world usually, among advanced nations? Why, that would be Germany. And where are the bad places? Well, that's all those people with brown skin, right? Except that now this isn't just the most prominent firm in Germany. Deutsche Bank, the champion bank of Germany.
Yeah, we talked about it a few weeks ago together. Yes, right.
Yeah, just a massive criminal enterprise with like actually scores of scams and felonies.
And they're involved in this scandal as well?
No. But this is Germany, right? It's Siemens, their absolute star in industry. That turned out, they were bribing all those folks internationally, right? So Germany has a crisis. Germany has massive tax evasion by the wealthy as well. So they not only cheat and become wealthy by cheating, but then they're such SOBs that they don't want to pay any taxes on these massive gains. So they cheat on their taxes as well. And lots of Germans are absolutely disgusted with this and see this as, basically the death of what used to be some degree of German ethics. So it's hitting there. So in Germany, this has become such a scandal that they actually started investigating. They had a raid involving 300 investigators. Imagine that in the United States context. And they're alleging that it isn't just Volkswagen and its affiliates. They're alleging that they being German authorities, that there is a cartel among the leading manufacturers, in other words, Mercedes, along with VW in particular, in which the agreement is not to develop safety standards, particularly better emitting engines by far. And so the German authorities think that's a very real thing that they're currently investigating. Now, Germany has little history of putting senior executives in prison for any significant time. Even when they're initially sentenced to, 5 years, it's very common that they don't serve more than a fraction of that time period. So we'll see whether they're willing to do anything.
So just in the time we have left, what I'd like to get to, Bill, is the two things very quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, is that A, why is this so important for us to be following, from your perspective? And B, what roles U.S. police have been playing a very different role than we expected to play. They're really trying to extradite Winterkorn, and it seems that they're being a little aggressive in this one, which they have not been for other industries, especially in this country. So tackle those two things, if you could, for us.
Okay, so the four most important firms in Germany are all involved in these series of modern scandals. So everywhere a educated German looks, they go, oh, blank.
Right.
We have become a nation that is profoundly corrupt. And that's created a Gresham's dynamic in which everybody that wants to stay in business has to get corrupt as well. And these incredibly wealthy people are willing to cheat to get even wealthier, and they'll do so even if they have to kill people. Now, the U.S. end, what's interesting, of course, is we've talked about it. There's been a collapse of enforcement at every major federal agency. So why has the Securities and Exchange Commission just a month ago filed this very vigorous action against VW, and we have the Justice Department being active? Well, it's because Donald Trump has been saying openly in recent days, it all comes down to car exports. He's done this in the Mexican context, but actually U.S. and German automobile manufacturers are heavily involved in Mexico for export to the U.S. and other markets as well. Trump is focused entirely on automobiles in his great trade battles, and this is an opportunity to really stick it to a global rival. So now,
so this is an exercise in nationalism, really, and not an exercise in any kind of corporate accountability.
Worse, it's an exercise in selective prosecution to actually help domestic giants who themselves commit all kinds of violations of the law as well. And so it's the further breakdown of the rule of law in the United States and the personalization where you see Trump wants to use the powers of the government to go after anyone he views as a political or economic opponent.
So this conversation has been a lesson in don't believe all the headlines and to understand what's beneath them, which Bill Black brings to us all the time. And Bill Black, thank you so much. This has really been enlightening. I appreciate your time once again, and great to talk to you as always.
Vielen Dank.
And I'm Mark Steiner here of the Real News Network. Thank you all for watching. Take care.